Janet Yellen's wisdom for a 1 or a 2 hour speech is worth a couple $100,000. I mean, that's to me just a covert bribe where, a big bank is paying her to come speak, knowing that she's in a position of power to regulate them or will be in the future or is influencing policy. And they want her to influence policy in a way that will benefit them at the expense of everybody else. That's exactly the way the system works. And so there's a lot of immorality and corruption that comes out of having this broken money. And the people who control the money, I mean, it's patently absurd that we have 12 people that can set the price of money. I mean, the price of money is the most important price in any economy because it drives capital allocation decisions, which then drive the correct productivity, and outputs as a result of, you want to invest in the right things. And so if you distort the price of money, you make malinvestments and you're wasting money on things that don't make any sense. And that's a cost to society. If we had not had all of the distortions that we've had, we would all be living so much better. If you look at all the technological innovation that's taken place in my lifetime and in your lifetime, I mean, we all should be working 20 hours a week. I mean, it's unbelievable. Doing fine. They all have good jobs. They're smart. They're going to be very successful. And yet they come to me and they say, Dad, if the odds of me buying a house, given what I make and what I can save and what houses cost, I mean, it's like zero, and they have no idea how they're ever going to quote unquote get ahead in the world because of the way the system is set up. And but what needs to happen is fiat needs to get marked to market. I mean, all the boomers grabbed all the fiat. Well, the fiat's worthless. And then a third didn't really know what they wanted to do. They were just kind of living on their farms, not paying attention, from what I understand. And, it's kind of like you had to stand up and decide, well, what am I going to fight for? Do I want to fight for, self-government, or do I want to live under this crown? And, I mean, there are people who believe in the state, believe in the federal government, believe in, fiat money and benefit from that system. And that's fine. They're entitled to do that. But, the outcomes that they're producing aren't very good, are they? For most people. And
No.
Yeah, in fact, they're quite bad. If you dig down a little bit below the level of those of us who are doing okay, my sister lives in a rural community in Utah. She tells me some stories that are just heartbreaking in terms of how hard it is for the average person. So, that to me means that, it's incumbent upon those of us who are aware to try and push for a better world, a better system, a fairer system, and then to help those that we know and care about, in terms of telling the story of Bitcoin and telling why, helping them to protect themselves. I mean, I have stories of investors that I've orange pilled who, are now very thankful that, they bought it at 10,000 when I was pounding the rules in their favor. And so, the Fed has just totally dominated the economics discussion, and they've tried to make anyone. I mean, the Austrian model perfectly explains and predicts what's happened to our economy since the founding of this country. And the book takes you through that if you're willing to wade through. There are 2 chapters that some people have told me they're kind of the rough sledding, because I really dig into the history. I started 1789. I take you through all the financial developments up to the present day. And if you look at it, the Austrian model could have predicted it and explains all of it. And the Keynesian model is wrong and doesn't predict any of it and doesn't explain all of it or any of it. And it's almost laughable how bad they are. And I've got tons and tons of examples in the book. And yet they continue in power. And the reason they do is because the government supports them, because that Keynesian model allows the government to overspend and have the goodies to hand out, so that when you go in as a representative making a couple $100,000 a year, you end up worth millions. And so it's just a big corrupt. It's like we're dealing with the mob, teeth, right? She doesn't. I mean, she was bitching about how everything is very, very expensive. I get it. I could completely relate. I tried to orange pill her, but the point is, her view was she doesn't think about these things. I mean, this just isn't. It's not her area of expertise. She's not interested in it. She's interested in her kids and her family, and she goes to work and she does her job and she comes home, but she knows her groceries cost more and she doesn't know why. And so maybe she turns on the TV and somebody, Bernie Sanders says it's greedy corporations. Well, no, I mean, that's not really what it is. There's a bigger issue. And it's a little complex, because these people who've done this to us, they're sophisticated. They wear nice clothes. I was just watching Jay Powell this afternoon, And, I mean, if you didn't know better, you would think, gosh, look at this thoughtful, intelligent man describing to me what he's doing with monetary policy that makes a ton of sense. Okay. That's what, if I were a dental hygienist looking at it, that's the image that he would be projecting, right? If you're Larry looking at that, you're going, you're a fucking idiot. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, you've lied to us here and you've lied to us for years and we know it. So, it's, but I know that because I understand where the bones are buried and because I've been watching the system and studying it for years. And so I'm trying to give that knowledge in the world. And let me explain what I mean by that. Some people don't know what the term inelastic means. Um, when when the price of any commodity goes up, the suppliers of that commodity will change their behavior and make more of it in order to bring the price down and balance supply and demand. And so, as an example, if the price of gold doubled tomorrow, we would drill for, find, and produce more gold. If the price of oil goes up, then it makes marginal oil fields profitable. And so oil drillers will drill them and produce more oil. So think about that. The supply price goes up, supply goes up. That's the law of most commodities. Okay. With Bitcoin, because you have 21 million fixed supply, it's a very unique commodity. Doesn't matter what the price does, the supply can't go up. The supply just is the supply, period. It's fixed, it's algorithmic, it's decreasing every 4 years in terms of its new issuance. So we've never seen something like this before, ever. There's never been any form of money that could not be diluted. I mean, even gold, which used to be the soundest form of money, the supply grows at 1.7% a year. Multiply that times 55 years and you've doubled the fine. But these are true, legitimate professional investors who are aware of it. And I said, how are you going to feel when it's $1 million a coin? Because it's going there. And then again, how are you going to feel when it's $10 million a coin? Because it's going there too, not over longer time frames. Because you're aware of it. And, it's amazing to me. I was down at the New Orleans Investment Conference. I met a guy named Jim Grant. Some of the older listeners will know who he is. He's written a number of great books. He's a monetary economist. He's really a brilliant, charming guy. And yet he really shat all over Bitcoin. He said, well, it'll be money. Give me 1,000 years of history and then maybe I'll consider it money. And I said, Jim, when people were wandering around and trying to jump up in the air, and then somebody invented a machine that allowed them to fly, did you have to wait 1,000 years to believe that the flight made sense? I mean, it was kind of, and he kind of just scoffed at me. And I was just like, how can somebody who was supposed to be a monetary expert miss the biggest development in the monetary field in 1,000 years? I mean, like the change from coins to ledgers or banks. I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I went to Harvard Business School. I go down there and there's a guy there who's going to go to work for Saylor really throughout the world over and over and over again. And, we're so early. I mean, we're still considered fringe. We're still considered psychopaths and all the other things. There's still a lot of negative FUD, but it's starting to shift. I mean, I remember the early days of the internet and a lot of people thought it was just a joke. But in by 78, 79, I'm sorry, 90, 97, 98, you could see, the connections were getting faster. The Windows browser was there. It was point and click instead of green screen. And you could we're kind of at that stage. When the ETFs went through, that was a hugely positive event. Huge. I mean, I had a lot of people who actually orange-pilled right after that because their objection prior to that had been, well, the government's going to just kill this thing. Yeah, you're right. I get it. Sound money. I'm all for that. But there's no way the government's going to let you do that. And but the ETF it worked. We took off with all the money printing because it responded to that and as a sound form of money. But then the tightening brought it all back down, and SBF blew us up. But it's now there's now almost nobody that's not aware of its existence. I mean, here's a perfect example. This morning I was reading the Wall Street Journal. Nick Timiraos was speaking about Fed policy, and he talked about how whether it was tight or loose was in part determined by things like this, the screaming price of Bitcoin. I don't think those were his words, but, and for Bitcoin to be mentioned in an article about Fed policy, I mean, that's kind of an Overton window shift, right? So everyone's becoming aware of this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, the Gladwell model says as long as it takes you to go from 0 to 15 or 10%, it'll take the same amount of time to go from 10 to 90. And so we're 16 years in. These adoption curves, they do get steep, and I've seen the same curve for mobile phones, computers, PC. I mean, almost every development. I mean, washing machines, and automobiles, any new invention, and it tends to get started, and people start using it, the early adopters. But then when it becomes pretty obvious that, oh, this is a good thing, and we want this, and I think